Alright, it's Vegeta8259 again, and this is going to be the work in progress video for the 1 to 1/44th scale Zaku Minelayer. Now, my apologies, I have already gotten quite a bit of work done before starting this video, so kind of at the halfway point. Well, maybe a little over halfway, but I am doing some proportion and detail modifications to this kit, and right now it's very loose. There's very few things are glued in place, but it'll be fine once I do final assembly. So I'm just going to take the head off and the arms and pretty much give you a rundown of what I've done so far. So my goal with these modifications is purely cosmetic. A lot of people like to go in with these older kits and give them new joints and give them a lot of extra articulation. I stopped caring about articulation and posability a long time ago. In fact, I'm building this to be basically a fixed pose model. The feet were originally quite a bit larger, and I narrowed the feet, basically split the foot in half, sanded it down, made the foot a bit more narrow. Also, the feet were not flat on the bottom, so I simply used a piece of pla plate to replace the bottom of the foot. So now it's flat. This piece here in the center, the top part of the foot, was going straight up and down, so I cut that loose and used some epoxy putty to put it back in place at a slight angle so that the Zaku will be able to have his feet flat on the ground while having the legs spread out. The lower legs I haven't done very much to. In fact, really the only modification I did to the lower legs was installing this aluminum wire for the ankle. Sorry, it's a little bit of a tight squeeze in there, and I don't want to break the joint. Come on, there we go. So yeah, I could have cut that wire a little bit shorter, but I just put a little plastic beam up in there, secured it in place with some epoxy putty, drilled a hole through it, and I've got a roll of 2mm aluminum wire. This is a very popular technique with Japanese modelers to take aluminum wire and use that to replace the joints on these older kits. So that way it's fixed pose, but it's still got a bit of flexibility to it. The lower legs, I have similarly used an aluminum wire, drilled a hole up inside the torso. As you can see, I've had to grind away some of the plastic so that the leg could be at the proper angle. Otherwise, just built straight out of the box, the legs were facing forward and they couldn't really go at much of an angle. Let's see, the skirt armor I have thickened slightly with some epoxy putty. Here in the back, I lengthened it a bit. It was originally cut off right about here, so I added a good 5mm to the back skirt. The upper torso was quite wide. A lot of these older kits are very broad-chested, so I cut off the sides of the torso and then added a piece of pla plate here, drilled a hole for the arm, and made the upper torso a bit more narrow. Also, the chest, the cockpit hatch, was quite flat, so I added some epoxy putty to round that out and give it a little more bulk to it. The arms, I have replaced the bicep and elbow area. It's just an aluminum wire, and then I wrapped that in an epoxy putty. This is very rough at the moment. I've still got to clean this up. The hands I will be replacing because the original hands that come with it are not very impressive, as you can see. So I'll be replacing those. The shield, I'm simply going to fill in the underside of the shield, and then I'll have to make a new connector to connect it to the arm. Spiky shoulder armor, I've made the spikes quite a bit wider, and I'm still in the process of sanding those and refining those. I originally had them quite blunt, but I didn't really like how they turned out, so I've sharpened them up a bit. So I've still got to sharpen this one spike on the end. And for the head, I filled in the mono-eye area because there was quite a bit of a gap between the original plastic part and the outside of the helmet. So I just filled that in with epoxy putty, and I'll paint that black and paint the little mono-eye. Also, I lengthened the nose ever so slightly, a couple millimeters. Put in a new piece for the little vent down there, and then replaced this tube that goes along the bridge of the nose. So I'm going to do a bit more work and come back once everything is finished. Okay, one part of the work in progress I did want to slow down and focus on are the hands. Now, the original hands that come on the kit are honestly pretty unimpressive, and well, that's how it is with pretty much all the old model kits from the 80s. So I'm going to be replacing these hands with something a little bit better. So these are some resin cast hands. These are called 80s Power Hands from a company called Brickworks. These are the 1:100 scale hands, and these are the 1:144 scale hands. Now, I could get out my silicone and my resin and make a proper resin cast of these hands, but instead I'm going to use a little trick that I've seen several Japanese modelers use. This is a product called Oyumaru, and it's basically like a children's toy. It's essentially a heat reactive plastic where it's a little flexible, kind of rubbery plastic block, and you heat it up. Most often I've seen people heat it up in boiling water, and it will melt into a soft, pliable state that you can use to form a mold. And then they use either epoxy putty or polyester putty to make a copy of the original part. and it's just a cheaper and more, what's the word I want to use? It's not as sophisticated as proper resin casting, but for something small like just a couple of hands, it should work out pretty well. Okay, so this is what it ends up looking like. Ooh, there we go. So it's not a perfect cast, but it'll do in a pinch. I can use it. Let's open up the other one. Oop. So it's pretty good at replicating detail, but it looks like there's some air stuck between the mold halves. I think that's probably what's causing this right here. But overall, not too awfully bad. Alright, so at this point, all of the modifications are now complete. And I'm going to admit right off the bat that I kind of let this project get away from me. I ended up doing more modifications than I originally intended. I didn't go into this project with a concrete game plan. I was treating it more as a blank canvas to experiment with some modifications that I'd been wanting to do on some of these old kits. And I just kind of tried them all, and it was a learning experience for sure. So a lot of these modifications were really successful. Some of them I have figured out better ways to do them, and some of them I found out that maybe not worth the effort really. So anyway, I'm just going to run down as quick as I can everything that I've done since the beginning of the video. So on the head, I've thickened the cables on the head, rescribed the panel lines on those, and the head's a bit loose at this point, but once everything gets finished and glued together, that'll be fine. Sharpened up these spikes on the shoulder armor. The skirt armor, I ended up cutting loose the side skirts and then expanding them out about 2 millimeters just to make the whole skirt armor a bit wider, and then lengthen them with some ply plate down here by about 4 millimeters or so. And then just, there's putty all over the place just to make everything even and smooth. The biceps, I have cleaned those up. Actually cut the bicep loose from the shoulder and kind of shorten that by a couple millimeters just to make the proportions on the arms a little bit better. You got these hands that I recast with the OU Maru. Still got to do a little bit of cleanup. In fact, I still got to do cleanup on everything at this point, but I'll do that once I get a layer of primer on the kit. The underside of the shield is now filled in. I've rebuilt a new connector for the side of the arm with a piece of aluminum wire. This crotch piece, I kind of reshaped that with some epoxy putty. The thighs, you saw where I thickened those. Lengthened the thigh by about 4 millimeters before I added the epoxy putty. I originally wasn't planning to lengthen the lower leg, but I got to looking at it and I thought, the proportions are a little bit off. These lower legs could stand to be a bit longer, so I added 4 millimeters to the lower leg as well, and then had to add some putty just to make sure everything was round and even and smooth. Likewise, since I lengthened the lower leg, I also had to lengthen the leg cable by just a little bit so it would actually reach the hole that it was supposed to go into. The backpack, have it. Really, the only part of the kit that I didn't do any mods to for real was the backpack. It actually looks pretty good on its own. I did soften the edges on the backpack like I did on the rest of the kit, just to give it, ooh, arm popped out of the hole, just to give it a softer, almost kind of a soft vinyl kit feel. I wanted to try that. I thought it might be a cool idea to try out. I don't know that I'll do it on any more kits going forward, but I'm glad I at least tried it once, because all of the sharp edges on this kit I have sanded down and rounded and made kind of soft and a bit more toy-like. And it's kind of a cool look. Don't know if I'll do it again, but I'm glad I at least tried it once. So, like I said, the backpack's pretty much unchanged except for rounding off some of the edges. And there's honestly probably still mods that I've done that I have forgotten to mention. There's so much stuff that I ended up doing to this kit. So, at this point, everything's pretty much done. I'm pretty much just going to put a layer of primer on this guy, and then we'll move on to the cleanup process. Okay, so this is what the Zaku Minelayer looks like with a layer of primer. And at this point, all I got to do is do cleanup. So putty, sanding, primer, repeat. Putty, sanding, primer, repeat. Until everything is nice and smooth and even and no more imperfections. Also, I need to go back and re-scrub some of these panel lines that were lost during the modification process, like here on the skirt armor, around the knee, down here on the feet, around the little shoulder spikes, some on the forearms, things like that. But this is where I'm going to end the work in progress video. I think this video is going on for long enough. So you can look forward to seeing the paint job in Gunpla Dreams Volume 2. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.